Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you to my panelists for agreeing to share their wisdom this afternoon. I'm going to speed up my intro a little bit since we're a little bit tight on time. And as much as I would love to go through the wonderful backgrounds of all of the participants here, I'm going to skip through that a little bit quickly with a quicker introduction so we can get into the meat of the matter. A little bit about our Partners and Alliances initiative. You know, this is all about the power and the value of collaboration. Right? We recognize what we bring to the table, we know what we're good at, but we rely on the expertise and the capabilities of partners. Every project has many components and many different elements that feed the success. And so what we want to do is to be able to continually nurture and develop those relationships, build that networking effect, introduce you to some new ideas, hopefully stimulate some thought, maybe be a little provocative about some things at times, and overall just bringing value through bringing people together through this collaboration. So this ecosystem, this level of collaboration, it really is a community. So we're going to ask that we be very direct and very blunt, and hopefully we expose some interesting ideas that you can take back with you and make actionable, right? Something that when you get back to the office you can think back to and consider how you can either implement a concept that was talked about, do a little bit more research, contact us, get some insight, and implement that for success. So first I will do some just quick introductions. We have Max Mead from TubeMogul. He's a senior vice president there. Joel Rubinson from Rubinson Partners Incorporated. He's the president of that group. We have Peg Kuman here, who's the vice chair at Relevate, who's also merged with Data Mentors, so you may see it referred to as one or both of those today. Mario de Cruz is with Keller Fay. He's a vice president there. And Richy Glassberg is the CEO of Medialets. So I'm going to start with Peg. You know, we heard a lot today about, it's all about the data, data, data. And in a past life, I had a sign in my office that said, "In God we trust, all others bring data." And it was a little g, just for the record, but at any rate, that was my message. And I've been on the data path my entire career. And I think when I first met Rex, I probably insulted him because I claimed that 50% of your advertising dollars aren't spent well, right? You don't know where your money's going. And he convinced me otherwise, that actually there is a way to prove that. It's called attribution, and I've learned ever since that that is in fact the case. But it comes back to the data. So I'd like to ask Peg for a moment, Peg knows data, to share a little bit about what it is that Relevate brings to the table in terms of a unique data set. And if you could, maybe share a little bit about where the data comes from, how it makes it into the platform, and why it's meaningful to end users.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to sit way back. I've been horsing around with data for about 43 years, both in direct and digital, and worked with close to over 1,000 brands over the last 15 years. To Rex's point, attribution's lovely, but if you don't have the insight to go into an attribution engine of any kind, you can't build anything. So we look at data in three different ways. There's empirical data, which is the stuff you absolutely know. It's typically made up of transactions. It's typically made up of things that actually occur on your watch that you can count and measure. And then there's the pretend data, which comes from places that in the ad world you all call it air cover, which is radio, television, and so on. And in the digital space, I think there's evolving a lot of air cover or noise, as well as some empirical insight. The empirical insight doesn't necessarily tell you what people are thinking. And so when you look at Marketing Evolution's attribution engine, which in our opinion is really the only one that addresses in an elegant way and is agnostic about which channel you use. We haven't found any other solution in the market, which is why we partner with them. Our data is very rich and deep in three verticals. One is life event trigger data, which we build based on deed records and then measure it and accuratize it against 7 of the 8 national databases to make sure that it's actually an event or a move or thinking about a move or a birth or a death. And then there is automotive data. We have the only automotive database that can be used for marketing purposes, given the Driver's Privacy Protection Act and Shelby. And that data is used largely by many of the OEMs. We partner with several of the large companies that have DMV data. Two of them are actually vendor partners and clients of ours. But again, that can't be used for marketing purposes. And then lastly, we're a vast treasure trove of licensed data, just like Rex and the Marketing Evolution team. We license 7 of the largest national consumer databases, and what sets us apart, because those guys are all our clients as well as partners, is that we are able to provide insight knowing which of those data sets have the best of class, the best exact age, the best pet information, the best household income information, the best net worth information by comparing all of those different data sets. And while contractually that insight has to be siloed, it can be shared using technology with all of our brands and client partners. So that's the pitch piece. But the other piece are the comments that I made when Gary was speaking earlier. We really live and breathe data, both locally and globally. And so we like to overlay insight and take a look at why is that result turning out to be that result, and question what the data is, and then look deeper into what's causing particular behavior among consumers, both transactional, behavioral, as well as demographic.
So just a quick follow-up on that. With all the talk about all the data that's available, do you see any areas where we might have a blind spot? Are there gaps that you find out there around consumer profiling and areas that we're not either getting the data or we aren't paying close enough attention?
So I'd like to talk about creepy data for a minute. And I consider, I'm a privacy wonk as well, I consider a creepy data that is mismanaged or handled irresponsibly by folks in sales and marketing, and that will attract the interest of those goofballs up on Capitol Hill. In mobile today, and I don't know if it was talked about, I apologize, I had to travel in this morning and missed the morning, but there are capabilities today where we can not just geofence, but we can actually track through device ID and mobile ID where people are going. I think one of the examples used by Gary earlier was we know when someone goes into a car dealership and we can see how long they've stayed there. And gee, wouldn't it be interesting if that insight were made available to all of the competitive brands in that locale? The manner in which that insight and that information is transmitted and transliterated to either a competitor's or that consumer by giving them a greater incentive to close that deal is the difference between getting regulated out of the ability to do it and having a very, very sweet space in the marketing world. So I think we need to be mindful of that, and that is creepy stuff to people. I love it, but it's creepy, and I think we have to be careful about how you handle it.
Thank you. Yes, the creep factor, we always have to be aware and careful around that. Sticking with the data theme, Mario from Keller Fay has a very interesting data set, something that we've begun to introduce into modeling capabilities, and that's the word of mouth data that they maintain. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, the data set that you have, what makes it unique, what makes it different, and a little bit about how it is measured and why it's important to measuring the ROI of any initiative, any campaign.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let me start with an insight from the president of Audi USA, who was talking about advertising, which is of interest to all of us. He said that advertising is really a conversation starter. If it's good, the conversation will keep moving online and move into coffee shops and golf clubs. If it's not any good, you'll know right away that it's a dead-end conversation. So we measure word of mouth. And word of mouth comes in many forms. These days, there's a lot of online word of mouth, but we're all humans, and there's a lot of offline word of mouth happening still. In fact, that's where most of it's going on. So the data we measure have to do with who's talking about your brands and how often are they talking about brands. One of our main data sources is the TalkTrack syndicated study that interviews 100 consumers every day of the year, different consumers every day. That's in the US. We also have a UK version. And we measure what brands they're talking about. It's a past 24-hour recall exercise, and then after recalling the brands, we go into depth for 10 of those brands and get detailed information about who was talking to whom, what was the context of the conversation, what triggered the conversation, things that will help you to understand how and why. So 2 things come out of this. One is time series data that you can use for marketing mix modeling or attribution modeling. The other thing that's coming out of this is the how and why information from the context, which is really important if you need to then act on the information and figure out, okay, I know now that this is important from my ROI modeling, but now what do I do next? We also do custom studies, and we also have information from both the custom studies and the TalkTrack database available on Excelate. So you can do programmatic buying against, say, who are the most influential top 10% of influencers in the beauty category or the automotive category. And you can find those using programmatic buying. Or if you want to know, hey, who's talking about BMW? We can help you find those people as well.
Fantastic, thank you. So have you found in the years of working with the word-of-mouth data, is this particularly aligned to any specific industry? Are there certain verticals that this is most effective, or is it pretty much across the board?
It is pretty much across the board. We find that in different industries, word of mouth has more or less impact. A couple of studies have been done and published. One is the Word of Mouth Marketing Association Return on Word of Mouth study, which looked at 6 industries. And the impact on sales that they found was anywhere from about 5% to 30%. And the pattern that we found there is that the higher consideration product categories tended to be on the upper end of that range. Another study that was done by Market Share, and that had a range of 10% to 54% of word of mouth impact as a share of total marketing impact.
Fantastic. Impressive, very impressive. Now I'm going to switch to Joel, the only person I think who raised his hand, or both hands, when the question came up about researchers in the room. So he's our sole survivor or sole representative from the research world. Tell me a little bit about trends that you're seeing in measurement, right?
Okay.
What are you seeing in the marketplace? You're working with researchers. What types of tools, what kinds of new capabilities are coming to market? What's become critical out there?
Yeah, I think what I describe to marketing research people is that there's now another brain in marketing besides the insights brain, that is the accumulation of the studies they do. The other brain in marketing is the DMP. It's the whole data ecosystem and infrastructure that a marketer has built. And if marketing research doesn't learn how to become relevant to the other brain of marketing, then it doesn't serve the marketer very well. And it doesn't work for a couple of reasons. One is research is not relevant to action that's being taken, which is driven out of the DMP and the advertising, the tech stack that you have. But the other thing is the tech stack is not that smart when it comes to strategy. So the strategic insights that come from research need to be melded together with the tactical optimization that comes from the tech stack. One particular use case of this has to do with brand tracking. The industry spends over $1 billion on brand tracking, and it's all broken. In fact, Coca-Cola brought me in to say, listen, we're spending tens of millions of dollars on tracking. You have to help us fix this. So the first thing I said is, no one wants tracking. Just like nobody wants quarter-inch drill bits, they want quarter-inch holes. Nobody wants tracking. What do you want? You want brand guidance. So I said, well, what's the difference between tracking and guidance? Well, one aspect of this, and this goes to the point that Greg made before, you're tracking your brand in brand tracking as if that's the thing in motion. That's not the thing in motion. The world is in motion. What you need to be looking at is your brand in relation to the world in motion. So as people fundamentally change their media behaviors, as they fundamentally change the way they shop, as they fundamentally change the way they acquire brand knowledge, what are you doing to keep pace with that? So what I advise research is it is an imperative that you not just do surveys of 1,000 people and think that's it. You need knowledge at scale. And to get knowledge at scale, you have to integrate the surveys that you're doing with the data that's known, the multidimensional data that's known about individuals based on the kind of diagrams that Rex was showing at the start of the day. That's how I can figure out how to bring value to the segment of consumers I am focused on for the needs that they have, is by learning how their media behaviors have changed in a way that I can communicate with them in a welcomed way. So for me, it's an imperative that we do the kinds of things that Marketing Evolution does to connect the digital ecosystem with survey-based data. They need each other. You can't, one without the other is like one hand clapping. So you need both of these put together. So I need Rex because he's an enabler of what I preach to companies like Coca-Cola. And maybe Marketing Evolution is happy that I exist because I help to create demand based on awareness of the importance of moving from point A to point B.
We do appreciate you.
So, okay, thanks. Well, I'm glad.
I want to go on record.
I'm glad to know I'm appreciated. Thank you. I know you do. I love you too.
Well, I go that far. Jeez, buy me a drink first. Oh, right. So I'm going to move on. We heard earlier, Greg did a fantastic job sharing the importance of mobile. We have Richy here to talk about mobile. That's his space. And I want to get a little bit of a technical here, but look, desktop tools don't work for mobile. So what do you say are the blockers to that?
So I think Greg was amazing. I love watching Greg. I love his delivery. He's phenomenal. And I've worked with Greg and Rex for a long time. My fear is a different fear for everybody in the room. My fear is you need Rex and Marketing Evolution very badly. My fear is garbage in and garbage out. And I think people are thinking you can measure mobile with the same tools you measured desktop. And that is a major, major failure of every marketer that we've talked to. Greg's supposition that, what was it, Greg, 3 to 5% was spending in mobile, but it's 150 times a day. You could use eMarketer that says it's 60% of the time is now being used on one of these devices. And marketers are all running to cross-platform and full attribution, and they're failing to see what you need to do attribution in mobile. Cookies do not work. The tools of the past are broken, and you cannot measure this device, any device, with a cookie anymore. And there is a big leap. There's a lot of people out there shouting a lot of stuff. The in-app environment to the mobile web environment, there's a disconnect. You can't take an identifier across those two. Most conversions are happening on a mobile web page. So we are an ad server. I'm one of the people that you'll know that I don't sell media, I don't buy media. All we're doing is showing what is broken in the desktop world and doing real attribution. So marketers like Amex, like AT&T, the list is on and on, don't believe that people are converting on this phone. So Amex didn't believe people were doing it. It is actually a 5-page application on a phone to get a gold card. We were able to put our conversion, and talking what Peg says, I don't deal in guesses. All of our attribution is a transaction ID. So my transaction ID sits behind the firewall, behind all the security, and I only get fired when Amex says, this is an actual accepted gold member card, here's your number, and I get transaction ID 1234. And they can then attribute that to a mobile ad. But I'm a silo. Guys, I am a silo. I need Rex, and somebody made the comment about odometry, I didn't say that. We see that failure. I am a point solution. I fully admit it. I need to give my log level data with the timestamp to show every impression that they saw, every single impression, because I'm the ad server, to somebody like Rex and somebody who's got a lot of smarts and a lot of brains behind it to say, this was a real attribution. But what made them get that Amex Gold card? Was it really the ad on Pandora? Was it the commercial they saw on TBS? You need that full, what Greg said, that full smocks mix. But my concern is you're failing to see what mobile is, and you're dead in programmatic, because if you can't see that the cookie-based technology and ecosystem that everybody grew up with in desktop does not exist. You just can't fall for it. It doesn't exist in mobile. That is a major failure for all attribution modeling, because you just don't know what's happening. You can't identify the device if you're stuck on the cookie world. So that's what we did. We built a platform, so all of our data is the client's data. We work for the clients. We serve the ads. Every instance is protected just like an ad server. We work for all 5 holding companies. We were bought by WPP. Why? Because this is boring foundational tech, and it was very hard to do. And so everybody's liking the sexy stuff. I'm a network, I'm this, and they're missing the point. And WPP's got a long history of that. So we sit alongside a Kantar or somebody else like that, but we're a wholly owned subsidiary, and we serve every holding company and clients around the world of just trying to help them solve mobile. And then we want to partner with Rex and Marketing Evolution. How do we give real log-level data into that machine so that the SMOC stuff that Greg is doing and the Marketing Evolution stuff can really tell you what's happening with this thing? You know, Greg said it. I have a 16-year-old and 18-year-old. They don't even know what a television is. They have no clue what a television is anymore. And by the way, neither does a mom 18 to 49 who, as Greg says, is touching this device 150 times a day. And that's my fear, is that we're not solving for that.
I heard a story the other day about someone asking their son or daughter, what are you doing on their smartphone? They're on their smartphone, and they said they're watching TV. Kids don't even differentiate anymore. This is now, I guess it's TV, as much as it's a phone, because it's a lot more, right? So that line is completely lost. But one more question. We're starting to get conversation around cross-platform. I mean, are we there yet? Should we be talking about that?
I personally don't think so. I don't think we're at cross-platform, because I don't think marketers have solved for mobile. And I'm scared that everyone's saying, okay, mobile's hard, so I'm just going to say cross-platform. And the largest digital advertiser in the world turned our system on a year and a half ago, and within 3 months moved 40% of their billing to mobile, because they saw, and we're not talking an incremental 5% lift, we saw a 600% lift in unattributed mobile conversions to a product that costs an average of $110 a month for a lifetime of about 7 years. So the lifetime value of that is just phenomenal. It happens to be a major player in the set-top box place, and it's just phenomenal. And then they said, oh my God, I didn't know this. And every marketer that turns us on within 2 months of turning us on changes their mix within 2 to 3 months of who they're buying, because up till now you are optimizing mobile on a click. If you can't see view through, then you can't optimize, and you can't just go to desktop. And then if you're going to use programmatic and you've got no way to signal back to the programmatic that device, when programmatic's making a decision and bucketing you in 5 different buckets, and you can't tell other than the click and the waterfall, the biggest fear we have is the waterfall in mobile. The counting is wrong. Desktop ad servers just don't work in mobile. Then your entire model mix is wrong. You have no denominator. You can't tell how many impressions you really had. And then that throws the whole thing off. So me personally, I'm very much against cross-platform today, because I believe a marketer must solve what this new thing is and then fit it into the model with all the other real data to see where the impact is, because I don't know what that impact is.
Great. Richie will be available for debate at the bar tonight, so you can take him up on that if you think he might be on a different track than yourself. And a bit of a segue, thank you to Max Mead from TubeMogul, talking about programmatic and programmatic connections. Interesting, when I first started looking at this, I think of it as the magic go button, right? This is where we push the button and magic happens and all the TV gets bought and all the spots get purchased and everything shows up magically on the device.
That's exactly right.
Is that how it works? All right, well then we're done here. That was pretty easy. But realistically, share with us, if you would, a little bit of the experience as you start to adopt programmatic more and more. What does that mean from a process, procedure? What does it take to get to programmatic?
Yeah, great. So how many people, by the way, are intimately familiar with programmatic? Is it something, how many people in the room are doing programmatic media-based buying? Yeah, okay, great. True. One of the phases.
So how do we get to doing?
So there are a number of phases that you might go through. On the one hand, in terms of just getting started, there's an incredible amount of low-hanging fruit. So if anybody in this room buys media or works for a company who buys media, you can start off buying on an IO basis, and the pricing might even be dynamic pricing, which gets you moving towards some of the benefits that you'll get in a more extreme, more advanced use case. And you can start getting some of the benefits right away. You'll get some cost savings, some improved transparency, probably some performance improvements versus an ad network. So that initial phase, you could think of upgrading from an ad network. The more advanced way of working programmatically is one where you're using the technology across every supply source, even direct publisher buys. Ideally, for us, we would aspire to be a technology that you use across every channel as well. The benefits when you get there are pretty amazing. There are some pretty massive workflow efficiencies. So the way that media has been bought and sold traditionally is through an RFP process that has just massive amounts of friction that I'm sure everybody in this room is familiar with to some extent at least. We can, when you're doing everything programmatically through a single technology, basically you can flatten a workflow and processes that used to take weeks and weeks, if not months and months, into literally just minutes. So that does take some, as well, you'll have, when you use our technology across the full buy, you'll get a level of transparency that can be a big step forward as well. Most media as it's bought today is very opaque. We're in essence able to shine a flashlight to show you exactly where your ads are running, the player sizes if you're running video, which ends up being a very important thing for video advertisers, viewability, site level delivery. You'd be amazed what you'd see even on direct buys in terms of where your ads might be running. In this more advanced phase, what you're doing is you're, in essence, shifting the decisioning logic from the publisher or the ad network. So when you're buying media the traditional way, basically you're trafficking out assets, and those publishers or ad networks decide from then where and when they're going to show your ads. So in this more advanced phase, when we call it smart enabling your full buy, you're shifting the decisioning logic from the publisher to yourself in our software. And so that has pretty profound implications on things like being able to control frequency, use a common set of targeting parameters across the entire buy. You might bring your own data, use that across all supply sources. And then importantly, as relates to how we would work with a company like Marketing Evolution, it allows you to very quickly take the insights and the recommended optimizations that Rex was talking about this morning and make those very quickly deployable, which you can't do if you're buying media the old-fashioned way until you get to the next RFP cycle. So basically you might have to wait months, quarters, possibly maybe even to the next upfront to actually make those insights usable. Whereas if you've gone to that fuller extent of fully programmatically enabling your buy, you can basically, it is literally pushing a go button, or at least making a phone call to us, and we can turn those instructions around very, very quickly. Getting from that starting point to that more advanced use case is not all fun and games. It takes the technical aspects are not all that difficult. It ends up being a lot of organizational change because you're starting to impact bigger parts of the buy and introduce some very new concepts into parts of the organization that are basically used to doing things a certain amount of way. So it's very easy to get started, start enjoying some benefits, but you really need. That's why this one reason this test and learn approach can be so impactful for getting from A to C, because you can bite off a little piece, show some initial success, take it back to your organization, get more and more buy-in, more and more credibility, and then you can, in essence, start to shape a roadmap that maps with that rollout, where you start to use the technology across a bigger and bigger part of the buy.
So, in terms of that, when you're an organization thinking about, or hopefully very soon executing on a programmatic strategy, any risks that should be considered, anything that can be done up front to mitigate those risks, and ways to approach this to guarantee success?
I would say there's a couple. You probably want to start small and phase into it. I think having a plan and a long-term vision can be really helpful. A lot of companies, a lot of the challenges that we see getting from that initial phase to that more advanced phase, the full programmatic enablement. We'll see a lot of companies that get stuck in this mode of just using programmatic as an upgrade to their ad networks. Could be worse, but you're just missing so much of the value. I would say it's really important to have a vision, hopefully some alignment organizationally with that vision, and then a path to work into that so that you don't get stuck in that first phase.
Great. Well, hopefully we'll see more and more hands raising over the years on programmatic. I think that certainly is the case. So now I want to present each of the panelists with 2 questions at once. We're going to be very efficient about this for a moment. You can answer one or both. We're just going to go down the line. We're going to start with Richy, and we're going to come this way. First, a piece of advice you would give to the audience, to marketers out there, something that you would just recommend that they be paying attention to, doing, moving forward on. And then second, the magic wand. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you fix about the way we approach, the advertising and marketing world these days?
I think what Max just said is a really key point. Test and learn, test and learn. We've seen client after client, when they turn on real mobile attribution for the first time, they don't understand it and they say, this is wrong. And you have to do it with real data. As Peg said, everything we do is based off of your transaction ID. We give them all the data. They go back to their CRM and say, this was a real thing. And they understand that it's working. And I think there's a lot of skepticism of what's really working in mobile. Programmatic is a wonderful solution if done right. And testing and learning, and Max is right, a lot of people get stuck. Programmatic can be private marketplace. It can be a lot of things. What was the magic wand I would wave? In being in digital for a long time, 21 years, the rise of the walled gardens and the rise of the amount of BS just continues to frustrate me, and I wish you could make that go away, but the business models block that from that magic wand. But a magic wand is supposed to make things that are impossible to go away, so I'd like the walled gardens
You're free to do that, absolutely.
to go away and have a little bit less of the BS factor out there. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to sell a car, you're trying to sell a drug, you're trying to sell a life insurance policy, and you're not about the hype.
Very good.
Shucks, that's a tough one to follow. Advice. I think we are living in the most exciting time as marketers and brands and advertisers on the planet. We have more technology, we have faster speed, we have more insight, we have more fun, and we're making more money than we ever have before. So my advice would be do it with deliberate speed, with understanding of what the insight that you gather means, and continue to ask questions. In terms of magic wand, there is none, but I would, Richy talked about walled gardens. I had written down silos. I think you have to break down silos. My favorite clients on the planet are the folks that collaborate and talk. I love the story about Cox. Again, congratulations to you. You broke down silos. You basically said, let's get all the players at a table, let's talk to each other, let's make this work. And the magic wand would be to get the C-suite to change compensation, because without that, you won't be able to break down silos.
Very good, thank you. Mario, your turn, the big questions.
Okay. I would say it's really important to target influencers. There are 2 really big problems in advertising that I'll identify. One is getting a consumer's attention, and the other is getting their trust. So I love Vince's story about how he's sitting with his wife, probably logging quite a few hours in front of the TV, and all you remembered was Jane. Well, people do that all the time with advertising. They have very selective attention. In fact, if we hop to new media, in usability research, there's this concept of banner blindness. And what that means is people are very good at tuning out the banner ad. And what I've seen in recent years is more and more aggressive approaches to make that banner ad become a big overlay on the screen that you have to make go away. Or it makes you wait on a screen before you get to the article you really want. Or that little banner at the bottom is starting to creep up and wasting space on the bottom of the screen. All of which I think are creating some negative experiences for consumers. It's a heavy-handed approach. In very many ways, it's an approach that is coming from broadcast advertising strategy of the so-called golden age of advertising. So what we really have to do is focus on what's important to consumers. What do they pay attention to? And as much as we're having problems in advertising being noticed, they still pay attention to people. So I would advise that people think about influencer strategies. Target the people who will influence other consumers, the people consumers pay attention to and trust. And actually, it's very targetable. Advertising works. It works indirectly through these influencers because when you get into the psychology of who they are and why they talk about your brands, it's because that's part of their own credibility. That's part of why people listen to them. They are hungry for information. And the trick here is to figure out how to make your messages talk-worthy. And we all know our feature benefit hierarchies and how to do branding that way. But how often do we really think about, is this something that's talk-worthy? Why would somebody want to talk about it to one of their friends? And in getting back to the Audi president's quote that I started with, if you want the message to keep moving and become viral, you have to consider human motivations. Why would they talk about it to somebody else? And I'd also advise research into understanding the context of a conversation. Who says what to whom? What triggers it? Things like that. And I learned something today from the 5 mistakes. Number 1 was in-market targeting bias. And in some ways, you could think of that as preaching to the choir. And what happens is if you're just targeting people who have a predisposition to your product or service, you may be preaching to the choir. But if you target an influencer, that person's going to tell 5 or 10 other people who may not be in the choir. So you're actually getting incremental gains there.
Great. Joel, your turn.
All right. Okay, so at an MMA event, I heard Jim Stengel, former CMO at Procter, say the secret to marketing is to get close to the consumer and then do something with it. Marketing research is really good at the first part, getting close to the consumer, and really sucks at the second part, doing something with it. So my advice to the audience, and I'll use the term more expansively because this is a smart audience that already knows the world of digital, but to an industry audience, I would say you have to bring your insights to scale. You have to think in terms of actionability. You have to connect what you've learned from your marketing research into being able to activate at scale by connecting to the tech stack. So that's my advice. In terms of a magic wand, marketing research, I mean, I love the profession. I love what we do. But I will say we get a little bit enamored with the elegance of the analysis. And we have to realize we don't have job security any longer by being smart and doing good analysis or hiring the right supplier who does good analysis. We are being held accountable for improving the productivity of the enterprise. And I would like to see marketing research teams, insights and analytics teams create a productivity practice, put their best talent against the productivity practice, and have that practice drive the culture, the tools, the capabilities of the organization. Because then you find that all of a sudden data sets are going to get connected, people are going to start thinking holistically, they're going to start thinking about how people live their lives and how do we connect better to that. So it would change the whole marketing orientation of the organization. And frankly, I know of no other way to guarantee our existence in organizations. So that's my magic wand.
Very good. Consider it solved.
Okay.
A couple points. I might reiterate a couple points that have been made. And I think the first one is before you start down this path of testing and learning, it's really important to establish the right measurement foundation. We have so many clients that they love the concept of testing and learning, and then they launch into these tests where they're optimizing towards some ancient KPI that has nothing to do with what moves the business. The previous session highlighted some of the work that we've done with the marketing evolution team, where we in fact did, can't emphasize enough, we discovered that the method of optimization that our client was using was completely 180 degrees backwards. So all of the recommendations that were coming out of this MTA, this previous attribution thing, were the exact wrong answers because they weren't using good experimental design and figuring out where the value was coming from, and it played on those. It's how we discovered those 5 biases, because we knew, and fortunately our client realized something was just not right. So you gotta have a solid foundation of measurement before you start making doing tests or making decisions. And I guess related to that actually is a second point about a little bit selfish, although I think it's very real and I believe it, is choosing your partners right. So there's a couple of references to walled gardens. What's happening in our sector these days, pretty concerning. There are large publishers who are building these verticalized stacks of inventory, data, algorithms, measurement systems, where the analogy that we would make is, what if you were buying a house and you realized that your broker was representing the seller of that house? That's a problem, right? And then what if you come to realize that that same person owns the house? Bigger problem. And then what if you realize that same person owns the MLS system and the methodology for determining whether or not you got a good price? Big problem, right? Maybe not illegal, but that's exactly what's happening in our space today. So if you're thinking of relying on a publisher to build out a technology stack, hopefully you'll be able to take a step back and start to realize some of the issues in that, directly related to this issue of establishing a good measurement methodology.
That's going to get you a standing ovation, probably. So before we wrap things up, I want to open it up. We've got a great set of panelists up here, lots of experience and insight. Any questions? Any hands want to go up? Throw a question out there. Yes, in the back. Michael again, yes. Did you get that? Location is the new cookie? The concept of location is the new cookie.
Location is the new cookie. Max is spot on. Before I answer that, Mike, I mean, if you think as a marketer that the guy selling you the media, his tech stack isn't going to bias his media, you're out of your mind. But so I think Max was absolutely spot on with that. Location is a new cookie. I think there's just so many problems with location. You know, there's problems with IP, there's problems with beacons. I think what Chris Cunningham and his company is doing with there's 300-something beacon companies that are trying to unify that. I just think that's a little bit far away, and I also think it gets into Peg's creepy factor. I think people don't want to be tracked. You know, what's the motto of New Hampshire? Live free or die, don't tread on me. It's one of those. I mean, I think we have to be very, very careful when you do that, because I think it's too close. And I just think there's too many holes in the data set for a marketer to think that location is the new cookie. Our belief is there won't be a cookie anymore going forward, as the cookie is going to go away. And it's not just going to be a device ID. I think it's going to be a mix of privacy-friendly, probabilistic, and device, again, privacy-friendly device IDing, and being very careful with that to build the best device graph to be able to do that. And then allowing the people to do the targeting to match that separately so that the targeting can be separated from it so that you're not crossing those streams. Because, you know, the Ghostbusters say never cross the streams. It's a bad thing.
Bad things happen.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, well, join me in thanking the panelists. Thank you very much.